I wasn't even sure if I should make this video because talking about this subject carries a lot of responsibility. However, if my experience can help anybody else, then yeah, this video will be worthwhile. So this video is going to be my experience dealing with orthorexia to try and control my acne. So just to explain what orthorexia nervosa actually is, because I think this is actually a bit of a grey area. I'm not sure it technically is an eating disorder, but in my opinion, it's definitely disordered eating because quite honestly, you become obsessed with food and it takes over your life. And yeah, it's definitely a form of mental illness. It really does, like, as I said, like take over your life, and it is something that I think if you're struggling with this, really you do need some sort of help. So I've just brought up WebMD. I know this is not like the most technically accurate website in the world, but it just sort of gives a definition which I think kind of helps you understand what orthorexia nervosa actually is. And it says that Stephen Bateman, who's a Californian physician, coined the term in 1996, and it basically means a fixation on eating healthy. So clean eating, being obsessed by what you're eating, and letting food in some way really kind of take hold of your life. So for me, dealing with problematic skin really took over my life throughout my teenage years. I have filmed an entire acne story video, which if you'd like to go and check that out, if that's something that you're also interested in, then I'll link it on screen. But today I'm just going to be talking about specifically food and acne and kind of where that led me. So ultimately, that desperation to try and fix my skin led me down a path of like self-blame, lack of self-love, and a need to try and control my skin. I'd let it kind of control how I felt about myself throughout my teenage years, like I said, and into my early 20s. And I just basically had enough. So I thought I was obviously on the right track, but my mindset was just completely off. I really kind of came from this from like a place of loss. So like feeling ungrateful for the fact that I had acne, feeling ungrateful for like my genetic makeup that had allowed my skin to look the way it did. And yeah, I just sort of came from a place of not feeling very happy. And if there's one thing that I've learned in my kind of later 20s is that like attracts like. So if you're coming from a place of loss, you're going to attract more of that. And I know this isn't true in every single case, but for me, I've really noticed a pattern in my life that if I sort of focus on all the things that aren't going well, all the negatives, they just sort of expand and I get more of them. In the sense, acne is a great example. So yeah, struggling with my skin, whilst I didn't have severe cystic acne, it always bothered me to have a few spots, and it always bothered me to have oily skin, and I was always kind of focusing and homing in on it rather than like appreciating all the amazing things and all the things I'm really grateful for and lucky to have in my life. Ever since I have, you know, really practiced daily gratitude and focused on all the things that I love in my life and I'm grateful for, they have only expanded. So yeah, coming from a place of loss, like I was saying, I really homed in on food. I thought that this was definitely the answer. I actually spent the whole of my Christmas holidays like researching healthy ways to clear your skin, particularly through diet, looking up all these different recipes and really taking an interest in how food affects your body. Once I started to discover the impact food has on your health, I literally went down a whole road of like self-blame. I couldn't believe the sort of foods that I've been eating my whole life. And you know, really sadly, I actually think I even started to blame my mum, maybe not directly to her face. But yeah, I just became really ungrateful, to be honest, and just thought, you know, this is all my fault. This is all the way I've been brought up. It's the Western world's fault that I've got acne and I've been eating all these processed foods. So when January the 1st hit, as I said, I've been looking at this all throughout the Christmas holidays. I decided from now on I was going to be clean eating, basically meaning I was only eating whole foods. Everything that I wanted to eat, I wanted to know where it came from, and this would be the absolute sort of end to my acne, and I'd be living this really healthy life. So some might already say that that's quite an extreme approach because honestly, it's quite hard to always stick to eating clean, and I'm really an all or nothing kind of person. I always have been. Like, I never do anything by halves. So when I said January the 1st I was eating clean, I absolutely meant it, and I took it very seriously. And maybe if I'd just taken this approach and been a little bit more relaxed with it, potentially I would never have gone down the route that I did. However, yeah, I went down a path of really being obsessed with this, and when I started to not really notice huge results in my skin, like nothing was really changing, probably because I didn't have severe acne, I just had a few cysts on my chin that would come and go. So when one or two of them came back, I thought, you know, this isn't enough, I have to do more. Which is when I decided to follow basically Deliciously Ella's diet. I used to buy all of her cookbooks and I would go on her blog and I would research the kind of foods that she was eating. And so therefore I became vegan, or plant-based I should say. I'd also read that lots of people had gone gluten-free and dairy-free for their hormonal acne, so that's definitely something I was looking into. So at this point I was vegan, I was gluten-free, and you know, I was clean eating, so everything had to have like an ingredient on it that I knew, so I couldn't have any kind of fillers, no artificial anything basically, which was already starting to become problematic because I was getting obsessed. Like I would have my fitness pal up and I would really be tracking everything that I was eating. And you know, anybody invited me out for dinner, I would have to look up the menu before I went just so that I knew I could eat something there. And you know, anything that I bought from like the supermarket, I spent probably like double the amount of time going through every single ingredient on every single like package. So yeah, it was already becoming an obsession. So when I felt like this wasn't doing enough, or that I could do better, and my skin wasn't what I wanted it to be, and my body wasn't what I wanted it to be, I then went down a rabbit hole of the internet and decided that I was going to follow all these YouTubers who are high carb, low fat vegan. So then this is basically where things started to probably get quite like dangerous for my health, because I honestly was tracking macros, like how much fat and protein I was eating, like every 5 seconds of the day. Honestly, like I would come into work and I would be planning what I was going to eat for lunch and dinner, and just working out exactly the macronutrients rather than actually concentrating on my job. And because there were so many people online doing this, I honestly thought, well, if they can do it and they're living their best life, then it's good enough for me, and this is exactly what I need to do to have the clearest skin of my life. I might add that at this point my skin really started to break out. Prior to this, I'd already stopped taking the birth control pill, which I'd been on for like 10 years. It really just didn't like fit in line with my whole clean eating thing, which is why I gave it up in the first place. So after I'd been eating high carb, low fat vegan for maybe a few weeks, I suddenly thought, you know, this isn't enough. I need to detox more. My skin was starting to break out and I thought, you know, this is a detox symptom and I really need to push myself and do better. So I decided to do a juice cleanse, which basically involved eating a ton of fruits and only juicing for, I think 2 weeks it was. In fact, yeah, it was at least 2 weeks. And this honestly, like, I think everyone around me was just like, what are you doing? I actually managed to rope my best friend into doing this cleanse. She wasn't vegan or doing anything like this beforehand, but I think she'd also been experiencing some sort of symptoms with her skin and things, and so she also did this with me, which I guess kind of gave me reassurance that potentially this was a normal thing to do. I'll be honest guys, my opinion on juice cleanses or any kind of cleanses is to really be careful. Like there really is no need to be depriving yourself from specific foods or depriving yourself from eating in general, to be honest, unless you have been actually told to do this by a doctor, unless it's an actual medical condition that requires you to fast. But 2 weeks anyhow is just way too long. If you wanted to do this for like a day or two to reset, or for whatever reasons your doctors might say, then that's, you know, you do that. But a 2-week cleanse of just eating fruits was pretty dangerous, I'll be honest. So once I finished the cleanse, I was honestly so unhappy because my skin looked 10 times worse. And I just really started to become, I wouldn't just say obsessed, but like controlled by food. I would only ever buy food from Whole Foods. I would never go out and see my friends for food. If anyone mentioned food around me, I started to feel really uncomfortable. I didn't like anybody looking at what I was eating. It just honestly became the worst time, and you know, I was actually starting to get really unhappy about the process of actually eating food. Because honestly, if you're having to look at every single ingredient in every single meal and every single snack all the time, it just becomes draining. Like it becomes an unhappy experience. And yeah, going into Whole Foods every day and spending honestly all of my money. So fast forward about 4 or 5 months, and at this point all I was eating was fruit and maybe some salad in the evening. I think actually I was following this thing called Raw Till 4. It's by Freely the Banana Girl, who is a YouTuber, and potentially this has helped lots of people, I don't know, but for me this was utterly dangerous because I was starting to have like really weird like heart palpitations. I wasn't having any salt, any fat at all. In fact, this whole kind of 80-10-10 macro kind of ratio, which they advise, which is basically 80% carbohydrate, 10% fat, 10% protein. I would probably say I was more along the 95% carbohydrate at this point. Like I just avoided all fats altogether, which if you know anything about hormones is completely crazy because you need fat, you need protein as building blocks for hormones. I think the most ironic thing is actually the only correlation between my skin and acne is actually sugar, and that was basically all I was eating. So ultimately I was blindsided and didn't really want to talk about what I was eating to anybody else. If anyone ever mentioned food to me, particularly like my parents or my sister or my friends, I would honestly just dismiss them very quickly about it and just kind of really believe that even though my skin was breaking out, that this was like a detox, and if I stuck with it, I would ultimately have like the best skin of my life. I was obsessed with everything being organic. All I was eating was organic fruit, and I would not have any chemicals whatsoever or anything that was vaguely artificial touch my plate. The crazy thing was I was spending all of my money on food, like it really took over my life, and I was on a junior salary in London, living in a London flat share. And for anybody who's lived in London or is living in London, you know how expensive rent is here. I think this subject is so tough because on one hand, I know how tough it is if you're struggling with acne to try and work out what's causing your acne, and you know, it becomes very easy to start ruling out food groups because you're scared of what's going to break you out without any real evidence that it's actually doing that. On the other hand, I truly believe that acne comes from within. It is something to do with your genetics, your hormones, and kind of your lifestyle, food, nutrition. All these other factors play a huge part along with stress, you know. So I do believe that there is a nutritional component to helping you clear your acne. However, if you become obsessed and restrictive about what you eat, that is absolutely the worst thing you can do for your acne. So I guess I really didn't think I had a problem with food at this point. I thought I had a problem with acne, and that's all I thought about. So I didn't really give my feelings and my kind of obsession towards food much thought until one day I was traveling home on the tube. I just finished work and I was sitting there with my massive Whole Foods bag full of like fruit, bananas, like that's all I was eating that night. And I overheard these two girls, and they were basically talking about a friend of theirs, or what I gathered. And they mentioned the word orthorexic to describe her, and saying that she was obsessed about eating clean, obsessed about what she was eating and what she was putting on her plate and what she would cook with, and how she basically had become a different person and wasn't really socializing with them anymore. And they were obviously very worried and concerned about this friend. And honestly, I think I was listening to music and I overheard this, and I just had to pause what I was playing on my phone and listen to their conversation. I was basically just eavesdropping, and it really like struck a chord with me. I suddenly really felt like they were talking about me. It was a massive wake-up call, and I suddenly thought that I really hoped like my sister or my friends hadn't really thought the same things about me. And I just knew, like I absolutely knew that I needed to change like what I was eating. I kind of looked down at this bag from Whole Foods and was just like, what am I doing? So along with having acne scars at this point, so I could see the acne really scarring my face, that along with the fact that I really needed to address this food situation is ultimately what made me decide to go back on the pill to help me clear my skin and help me work out like what was actually working and what wasn't. And I'm not saying I went back on the pill and everything was fine overnight and I was just eating whatever I want. It took me ages. Like, I'll be completely honest with you, I still check ingredients on food quite often, but that's more because I like to be mindful about what I'm eating rather than being obsessed. I think that is the absolute key here. It's really not about saying just letting go completely, because ultimately if you're somebody that has struggled with disordered eating, like I have a very small experience with this, I'll be honest, it was over the space of sort of 6 months where I was really obsessed with what I was eating, and I can't imagine what it's like for somebody that has had a lifetime of this kind of control with food. But I think it's almost going to be impossible to say to somebody that has struggled with some form of eating disorder or some form of controlled eating to just let it go, because even if you are aware of what's going on, that control is so hard to lose. What really helped me was actually knowing that other people were going through this as well. Like the fact that it had a name kind of said to me that definitely I wasn't on my own with this and there would be a way around this. And, you know, going back on the pill allowed my skin to clear up. It gave me that kind of relief where I could start to actually research nutrition and actually work out like, what would be the reason cutting out meat, dairy, gluten? What are the reasons that that might help clear your skin? And what are the reasons that it wasn't clearing my skin in particular? I think a huge thing here as well is really taking that kind of self-blame off of yourself. Like, you cannot always control what your body does. Like, you just cannot. And I think for someone like me, I am a massive control freak. That idea just felt really uncomfortable. But ultimately, you have a choice about what you eat, but you can't always have control about what that food you eat does to your body. So it's kind of letting go of that and understanding that you may have acne, you may have the most perfect diet, and there are going to be other factors that control that, not just food. So I'm really, really grateful that I have found kind of what works for me in terms of diet. Like I said, I still am very mindful about what I eat, but I think there is a huge difference, as I said, between being mindful and being obsessed and letting it control you, because ultimately if you're not doing things that you would normally do with your life, and you're not going to enjoy doing things like eating with friends and talking about food and enjoying food, then ultimately this really, really needs to be addressed, because that is no way to live, and I know how depressing it can be. If you're somebody that's actually going through this right now, I really, really feel for you, and I would just really recommend speaking to somebody that cares about you and that loves you, because ultimately that's what I just stayed away from doing, and it actually stopped me from addressing this really early on. I would also say that if you're somebody that already kind of struggles with disordered eating, it's really, really worthwhile like speaking to somebody professionally. If you feel like you can't talk to your loved ones for whatever reason, like you feel uncomfortable, I know I did, then I'm also going to leave some links down below in the description, because there's certain groups that can definitely help you and support you, and I would really, really recommend checking those out. Also, I'm not a professional, but I'm always happy to be a friend, and if you ever need somebody just to talk to, as I said, I'm not a professional, I can't give advice, but yeah, if you feel like you need somebody to listen to you, then head over to my Instagram and feel free to DM me anytime. My handle is @Sarah_skinstory. But ultimately, you will get through this. Like, this isn't a life sentence. You will definitely feel positive about food and enjoy all foods and enjoy eating what you want to eat. Because whilst I'm mindful about what I eat now and try and eat like really healthy, nutritionally dense food to feed my body and give it the fuel that it needs, it's also really important to eat the foods that you love, because that ultimately feeds your soul, and like, life is to be enjoyed, right? So if this video really resonated with you, if you're also somebody that has struggled with acne, then I've also filmed a whole video talking about my acne story. I talk about how I'm finally happy in my own skin, so please click the video below and join me over there. I'll see you in my next one. I actually experienced my first cyst. Oh my god, guys, I honestly remember this day so well. I think I was about, 17, 18, and I did not know what was going on with my skin. I actually just wanted to die. I was honestly really embarrassed. I did the worst thing possible as well. I actually took a needle to the cyst. Okay, guys, like, you can only imagine